It's good to have you back. It's good to be back on the mic. It's like we always say, you and I have these type of conversations pretty frequently. And now just recently we were like, you know what, we should actually, at least record a small percentage of what we talk about, because this is the kind of stuff we talk about all the time.
Absolutely. For all those that care, we'll start recording small percentages of yes. But it's the world we live in. It's the world we love. So we naturally talk about it quite a lot. So yeah.
Yep. And I just think it's so interesting for those who also care about our the history of our friendship. That we went for like 6-7 years without really basically never talking, and then all of a sudden you called me up about something super random a few years ago, and now it's like, oh no, now we talk all the time.
All the time. Work together on projects.
I love it. It's good stuff. Well, speaking of that, today we're kind of diving into the topic of working with creatives and working on your creative projects. Now, to be clear, this is not really gonna. We've had episodes in the past and people on where we talk about the creative projects from truly the creative side. So, if you go back and look up episodes with like Matt Lacron or Stephen Houck, those are kind of episodes if you're looking for, hey, I want to dive more into the creative side of things as far as branding and whatnot. Now, and so we've definitely discussed that, and we will probably discuss that more in future episodes. But this particular conversation is going to be geared more towards, I guess, what we would say the tactical side, the practical side, like actually getting things done. Because and Jeremy, I know you can speak to this, but what I have found the more that I'm in this world, that you can be super creative and you can make stuff that looks good and whatever, but if you can't organize it, and if you can't stick to deadlines and have a solid timeline, and also just know how to communicate, give feedback, if you can't get some of these just tactical things down, then it doesn't matter how creative you are, you're still going to come up short. And I don't know if that's been your experience as well, but that's what I've definitely noticed over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And some funny thing about creatives is typically they're not timeline rigid driven people, and so typically when I work with creatives in our church experience, they're great and they're all of these things, and they'll get through a project, they want to scrap the whole thing, and I'm sitting over here and just going like, but I need it in 6 days though, right? So someone needs to be the one watching the clock, and that might be your strength. If you're super creative, clock is probably secondary to you. Or they'll ask, oh, can we just reschedule that big day at church because I'm not quite done with the design? Like, no, we can't. Like, I'll take your 80% design done because it looks good. It's fine. It looks really, really good. So yeah, it's true. There always needs to be somebody who is pushing things forward, and hopefully that's you as a leader. So.
Yeah, and in my experience, there's it's almost a really beautiful thing when you can find that right. It's kind of like that team, if you will, or maybe it's just you as kind of like the like you said, the leader, the project manager, whatever you are, to keep things on track, and then the creative, because then you kind of get the best of both worlds. Because I've been in the position before where I have to be both, and you have too, Jeremy, and that is really, I don't know, man, that's a lot, and it's just also really, for me, it's hard because it's kind of like left brain versus right brain, like you have to stay on time or stay on track or whatever, but then you're also trying to be creative and make it just right, and it's a horrible situation to be in. So I really over the years, that's kind of, I've leaned more into like I said, hey, I'm more of the project manager, at least on our team here, and I'm keeping everybody on track, and then we've got creative people that are able to kind of live in that world while I live in the world of the organization and all that, and then and then we work together. So it's a really good thing. So now when it comes to this, I mean, I guess when you go to start let's say you have never, let's kind of create a scenario here. Let's say you're a pastor, church leader out there, and you've never actually worked on any significant scale with some type of with delegation, as far as delegating to a creative. And because what I'll see from time to time is, actually I've seen it several times, is I will get on some type of a call with with somebody like that. It's their first time. Maybe they've been doing it themselves or whatever, or they haven't been doing much at all, and they're finally ready to take that step of getting someone professional to help them with it. And a lot of times it's kind of just like, you can tell it's like, you don't really know where to start now, do you? Like you're just kind of like all over the place and whatever. Yeah. And so that's where I thought we would start, is saying, well, here's where you can know where to start as far as for these different types of projects. So
right.
And we're not, and that's the other thing about the world of creativity, if you will. There really are a lot of different kind of fields and specific departments, if you will. So we're going to keep it pretty general and broad. So when it comes to a design, and what I mean by design here is like, we want something designed for an upcoming event, sermon series, something like that. I'm not necessarily talking about logo design here per se. That's kind of a completely different realm of it. So we might kind of save that conversation maybe for another time. But when it talks about, like I said, you're just day-to-day, week-to-week design, if you will.
Right. So things we're not talking about, not a logo, not initially setting up your website, but things that are reoccurring constantly, big events you have, sermon series you're going to do, big days, things like that. Yeah.
So these like you said, this ongoing stuff. So if you're going to start with a design, in my experience, almost every time you want to start with what we call the title graphic. So because even if you say, because a lot of times I'll get somebody and they'll hit me up and say, hey, I want a brochure, okay, or I want something, maybe formatted for print, or I want this sign or this banner or whatever. Well, even if that's kind of your end game, the place that you want to start is the title graphic, or maybe you could even call it the theme graphic. You want to essentially establish a visual theme and a title. In the form of that title graphic, and typically that's formatted for 1920 by 1080. Works with something you can use in your to project on your screens, something like that.
Absolutely, most churches are working with either, let's say if you have a smaller auditorium, you have a television in there, right, that you're displaying things, or most churches have projectors of any size. And so it's so true. One of the things that drives me crazy is, we'll put out a brochure or whatever, or we're announcing something, and someone will come to me and say, hey, I loaded this up. I couldn't find the graphic for it, but I just found something that says we're having a work day online. And so now you've got all different kinds of looks, right? But so you're absolutely right. If it's a work day you're promoting, if it's small groups you're promoting, anything, you've got to start with an initial graphic and design. And some of those, like small groups, you'll reuse that title screen again and again and again. That's great. And some of them just an event, you'll get rid of it. But it definitely starts there, because people are like, well, I don't really need one of those because we're doing printing. Okay, well, are you going to put it on your church Facebook page? Then yes, you will need one, because people have to identify with some type of object for it, not just blank text, or whatever. So you're absolutely right. A title graphic is always the place to start when you're getting a creative design.
Yeah, and I have, in fact, pretty much any time, someone submits a request to our team and says, hey, we need a design here, we don't even really give you an option. Like, that's just where we're going to start. We're going to send you a title graphic, and we're going to, because that's the thing, like, especially when we talk about printing and multi-page type of designs. Well, there's a lot of detail with that. So if I took all this time to, design this brochure or this booklet, or even like this advanced, kind of like, I guess, presentation slide deck for maybe a sermon or whatever, and I designed all of that in the detail, and obviously I'm using the same visual theme throughout, and I send it back to you, and you don't like the visual theme. Well, now I have done all that work to and it took me longer. Like the turnaround on that is going to be way longer. And so we've done all this work and all this effort for you to say, oh, you know what? I actually just don't like the way that looks. And so now we've got to kind of start from scratch visually, and all of that work, if you will. It's not all 100% of it's not pointless, because yes, there's some things that you could probably tweak and reuse, but still, there's a lot of time that was wasted nonetheless. So that's why we say, even if you do say, yeah, I want some type of I keep saying like a brochure or a booklet that's got different pages and whatever. That's great. So kind of the starting point we would say for that is we'd say, okay, that's awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the title graphic, which more or less that's going to be the graphic that gets used on the front cover. You are going to start compiling the content if you haven't done that yet while we're doing that. And then we're going to send you a concept for that title graphic for, like I said, that would more or less be used for the front cover. And we're going to start tweaking and making sure we get the visual theme right. And then from there, we will begin to build out the rest of your, brochure in this case, or like a booklet, whatever it may be. So for a design, pretty much regardless of the ultimate in-game deliverable that you want, the end product, we're starting with a title graphic. And a lot of times, for most projects, a title graphic, like you were kind of saying earlier, you'll be amazed how many applications you can actually use that in, whether you thought you needed it or not.
Absolutely. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, is there ever a time, like as you're saying this, I'm trying to play devil's advocate and disprove you, and I still can't think of a time where you would use anything, anytime you're trying to communicate information, whether that's an event with a hard date or whether that's a program your church does, there is never a time in which you're not, you don't need, like what you said, a title graphic. So yeah, you're 100% right. We went through it with all of our, just recently with our church, to give you an example of where I ended up starting, because everything goes back to design, right? We launched a bunch of new small groups at our church in the last, coming out of COVID, like 6 of them in total. And all of them, they wanted to promote, well, can I get a business card to kind of pass out? Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Sure. Class signage, yeah, absolutely. And then I started back at the beginning, oh, you know what? Every single one of you need class logos. I'm going to have a class logo and for them, it was funny, as a church member, they're like, oh, no, I don't need that. It's right. I just need a business card. I was like, okay, well, what do you want me to put on just your name on the business, just a bunch of text? And for them, they're like, oh yeah, that'll be great. But for me, it would not be great. No. Yeah, I have to worry about how this is going to look and all this other stuff. So then I had to get someone started on that. And we, over the last 4 months, we've gone through, and then it helped me to go back and say, okay, what other classes, other groups are missing logos? And we've had to redesign. It's kind of crazy because a church like ours, which is not like a huge church by any means, I counted it up and I'm like, man, we've got 15 different logos floating around here. Yeah. Just for all of the different things and programs that you do, whether if you're doing a Awanas or if you're doing a master, every single one of those have logos. And so maybe it's only important to the 8 people that go to that small group or the 10 people or whatever, but when they see that, they know what it is. They identify with that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, same thing. Starting with a title graphic, you need it for everything. And sometimes people get annoyed, like, oh, no, you don't understand what I really, really want. And I always try to tell them, no, you don't understand. It's always more in depth than this one thing you're wanting. If you're ever going to talk about it anywhere else, on social media, if it's on your website later, if it's in print, if it's on screens, if it appears in your bulletin, with some type of design, you have to have some type of screen graphic. And really having that one screen graphic, you could use in all of those applications. That could look good on your website. It could look good on your televisions. It could look good in your projectors. It would look good inside your bulletin. And so starting with that screen graphic, like you said, is huge. And they don't take forever to create, because you probably have the same ideas that most people have. So there's probably something out there that a design person can adapt or work with or use or whatever. So, yeah.
Well, and so, and you kind of started to mention this, and so that kind of segues into maybe the next type of project where to start. The only exception would be to you're not going to start with a title graphic, is what we would call branding collateral or branding materials. So you mentioned business cards, maybe some type of connection card or communication card. Okay, yeah, well, you're like, well, yeah, a connection card, that's just blanks, whatever. But there's still a visual theme that you want to follow. So yeah, now let's say, okay, that we were talking about like a design, like an event graphic, sermon series graphic, but now let's take a minute to talk about if you want to start a logo or a branding project. Well, where is the starting point for that? And the starting point is pretty obviously going to be the logo. And the logo / developing some sort of branding guide. Now, I'm not necessarily into these elaborate branding guides that you see out there. Like, if you can look at, like, big companies have like these branding guides and bigger churches have them, and that's all good and well. I'm not talking about something big and elaborate like that. I'm talking about establishing just some, really, it comes down to about 3 basic elements. Like I said, the logo, the actual visual logo, the fonts, and the colors. Because those 3 things are going to, for example, if I am going to develop a business card, well, I'm going to want to incorporate my logo, make sure I'm using the right colors and those fonts so that everything's cohesive. So when it comes to a branding project, anything like that, that's where you start. And if you've already got that, if you've already got like kind of like a brand established, just make sure that you're communicating that to your designer when you're asking for stuff like this. So if you say, hey, we need like I said, a new communication card, well, make sure you let them know, here's our church fonts and colors and our logo, so that they can incorporate that correctly. So with a branding project, that's where you're starting there. Anything else there about branding and logos and starting that kind of project?
I would just say, from you deal with this because you're the one pushing it forward. So I'm on the church side. I'm the one requesting. You're the one fulfilling the request. So I would just say, since we went through a major rebranding of our church logo, which we did that last year during. We tried to do a lot during COVID, which a lot of churches did. If they were shut down, we might be shut down for a little bit, but we're not going to stop. And so we took the time to redo a lot of interior spaces, and with that, we redid the logo, and then I tried to make it prominent. Put it up in some steelworks and in a lot of different places, new signs outside, things like that. I guess for me, the thing that I would say is be patient, because it's gonna take longer than you probably realize, and probably than you want to take. But what I had to keep reminding myself through the process, and I worked with you through this whole process and the logo we have now, I really like. But first off, no one can read your mind, number one, right?
That's correct.
So try to help them out as much as possible. And I feel like I did a good job in this one, because you and me had talked so much about this, I wouldn't have realized. But I sent in like 5 or 6 different logos, to you guys, saying, okay, I like this about this, I really like this. This is sort of what we're looking for with this, And I believe it helped, because I think after 3 versions, we were there. Now, if that sounds crazy to you, I mean, you can go 10 versions deep if you're really, 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 really picky, or if you don't provide a lot of information up front. But I think that the biggest sin that you can commit if you're on the requesting side like I am is not providing enough or little information to the person you're asking to design. You just say, okay, well, this is our big day, and I'm kind of looking for something that looks awesome. That literally gives them no starting points. They might, in their mind, think this is a great direction. You're way over here. So if you can scour any pictures or anything that you can send to say, okay, something like this is what I'm looking for. So provide information, to be patient, because it takes longer. I mean, going through the whole relogoing process for us probably took 7 months. Some of that was I was delayed. Like, I'd meet with people and show them, and I probably had too many people giving opinions, so that wasn't all on you guys, because sometimes it would take me 2 or 3 weeks to get back to you on, hey, can you tweak this or that? But what I kept reminding myself was, we're going to have this logo minimum 10 years. I felt like we probably shouldn't. We probably should refresh our logo like every 7. I don't know. You probably know a number that I don't know, because you research this more than I do. But just knowing us, and you forget about stuff and whatever else, minimum I was thinking we'll have this logo 10 years, maybe longer. The previous one was longer than that. I think the previous one was like 14, 15 years before we redid it, or kind of tweaked it, not completely redid it. So I just had to keep reminding myself, like, yes, it's a tedious process, but number 1, it's really important, and 2, it's going to be really lasting, and this is what our community will know us by. So just shut up and be patient, and I wanted to get it right. I could have done it in 3. I felt like we could have done it in 3 months, but I really wanted to do it right. And I probably drug out the process longer than I should have, but I really like what we have. So I guess my advice would just be patient, provide a lot of information, and just keep reminding yourself of what the end goal. One thing interesting that you said, and I'll bring this up, I know this doesn't have anything to do with creating it, but you told me once you actually get a logo in, it's going to take you probably up to 2 years to get that logo uniform throughout your entire ministry. And we're friends, so when you told me that, I was like, yeah, Luke, but I totally thought you were lying, man. I thought,
cool story,
no,
bro.
I can do this in 6 months. Like, oh, yeah, okay, well, you haven't dealt with my church, though. We're better than, whatever. But no, it does, because, man, the gospel track, because I'm sitting here with gospel tracks, I'm like, well, I don't want to throw away $1,200 worth of gospel tracks, so, like, we'll circulate them out, or whatever. But then signage here, and sometimes I still turn the corner. I'm like, oh, that sign,
Yep.
And then I had to get people. I had to finally just go and delete all the old ones out of Google Drive, and then tell people, like, text people, like, stop using this one. You're just refreshing. Stop it. We do have a new logo. So it did. It took all of. I think I beat you. It took me 20 months, but I only beat you by 4 months.
Well,
I'm sure I'll find another one. So
yeah. The experience I had to rebrand a pretty large church. And actually, I was in a really interesting position where basically somebody else designed the logo, so I didn't have to actually do that. Like, the work was actually already done in terms of, like, there was a new logo, but I took over the creative department there, and one of my first tasks was, I want to make sure this new brand gets implemented. I'm not kidding you. I mean, it probably took 2 years to do the bulk of it, like hey, most of it, but I still remember the day that the final kind of piece that was the old logo, which was, I believe it was actually the communication cards, because whoever was there before me had bulk ordered I'm not kidding you when I say tens of thousands of these. And of course, the church, we don't want to. I mean, honestly, if I would 100% had my way, I would have burned them all
away. Yeah.
But of course, it was like, no, we don't want to be wasteful, whatever. So I remember when it was like, oh, yep, we finally ran out of those cards, and we ordered, and that kind of like completed the process. That was 5 years in. That took 5 years from the moment we started to implement the brand. So,
wow.
Yeah, I'm glad we took a moment there to kind of cover that branding process, and kind of, because as you're starting a project, you have to set your expectations properly, and knowing that, hey, if you want it done right, it's going to take time. And so, because we're probably not going to spend too much more time talking about branding and logo specifically, so just know as you start that project that it is a process. It is going to take time. Even after you've got your logo design and finalized, it's going to take time to implement that new brand.
Okay, well, look, before you completely abandon this topic, let me just ask you then real quick, because maybe someone's sitting out there going like, how long has it been since my church? If you were recommending, okay, and I know you're going to recommend best case scenario, okay, but a church should, and I'm not talking about completely redo, like completely abandoned, but a church should refresh or update their logo. How often do you think?
Well, it's a very hard question to answer, but here is what I would say. So when I consider, you have to consider a lot of things. The first thing you have to consider is, if I take my logo as is, and I go out and I Google, kind of pull up on Google image, like, I don't know what search term would give you this, but like popular church logos or modern church logos or whatever. And I pull that up, and I've got a listing there on Google Images of all these, and you look at those and goes, yeah, those look kind of up, like they're up-to-date logos or whatever. And I take my logo and I put it beside them, and it just doesn't fit. Okay, something needs to happen. Something needs to be done to that logo. Now, this is why the initial branding process and designing or even redesigning a logo is so important, because you want to make sure that what you have, that the core of it can last for a long time. Like, really it should last, in my opinion, to some extent. The core of your logo should endure the lifetime of your church, or at least the lifetime of your generation, if you will. Of course, you're going to die off, whatever, and who knows if your church is still around 100 years, from now, who knows what they're going to do. But you know what I'm saying, like for your lifetime, if you will, your generation, that the core of it needs to remain the same. Now that said, and again, this is why getting it right kind of at the beginning is so important. If it's done right initially, it should be a logo that's easy to kind of adapt and refresh over time. Like if you look at Apple, okay, so Apple's original logo is actually like this random picture of like, I think it's like Isaac Newton sitting under a tree with an apple hitting him on the head. I'm not kidding you. That's the original Apple logo.
I didn't know
but
that.
But the one that we know is some version of what we have now, which is
Right.
the apple with the bite out of it, and that was originally created in the 80s, I believe, and now it has taken on many different variations over the years. There was the colorful version, with all the like kind of the rainbow color stripes or whatever. Then there was the more kind of they moved in kind of the I guess they tried to make it a little bit more 3D looking version that had a little glow behind it. And now the version that we have is basically just the flat, very simple icon Apple logo. And here's another thing I will say, and I didn't intend to dive this much into branding, but I think it's really good now that we're on it. Something in terms of to remember about a logo as far as where we are now in terms of branding trends, I suppose, is that we're getting to the point to where like what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the logo as simple and minimalistic as possible. Because, like for example, to use Apple, keep using Apple as an example, if you say, well, what are Apple's, like we talked about colors, well, what are Apple's colors? And honestly, I'm like, white. Like white and black and gray. I mean, Apple doesn't necessarily have set branding colors. What they do have, though, is a brand that pretty much works with any color spectrum and any color scheme.
Right. Some people don't have logo flexibility at all because it can't work with like. If you have so many colors going on first, let's say you're a lighthouse church or whatever, you have a lighthouse. If you have so many different colors, pronounced colors going on, well, that's great. It might look good on that one logo, but what if you had to put it? Does it still look good in print? Does it look good if you have to put it on the back of something else? Because you really should have your logo should be able to go into one color and still look good. And this is a problem that a lot of logos have. Maybe if you have a logo from the 80s or whatever else, can you turn your entire logo, let's say just white, right, or just black, and it look okay? And if you've got a bunch of colors going on, that looks great, but I guarantee you it's not as flexible as you would like it to be once you start putting your logo on a bunch of different things, which you should be doing. Anything you send out, any reminder on Facebook, should have your logo on there somewhere as much as you possibly can. Because again, you want people to see that logo and know exactly what it is, just like they can do with the Apple or the Swish or the arches or whatever else.
So exactly. So it all comes back to if you're, and that's the other thing, if your logo is ultra complicated right now, you need to redesign it. You need to, and because I remember your old logo, and that was the thing about it. It was a little bit, there was a lot going on in terms of like the logo, and so I really loved the direction that you gave our team, because what we wound up doing was not abandoning the original logo concept. It was just making the goal was really to simplify it. Was to make it more minimalistic, so that it could adapt, if you will, over the years. And so that's another thing I'll say. Like if you're going to design a logo, don't, like I talk about colors. Don't get too hung up on colors. Like your logo needs to exist in a way that is actually good and in just black and white. So. There's really a lot more that we could dive into there, but again, I think this does. If we come back to kind of the topic, is we're talking about where you can start these types of projects, and if you're going to start a branding or logo project, all of this is knowledge you need to have up front as you go into it, so you know what to expect. so that you know why. Because here's something: if you ask a designer for, hey, I want this logo, and you describe this overcomplicated, too colorful whatever logo that you want, and they kick back and say that's a bad idea, listen to them. They know what they're talking about. Or likewise, on vice versa, if you say I want a logo, and a designer comes back with this, like I said, overcomplicated, too colorful, too much going on logo, then you've probably hired the wrong designer. They have an outdated style, and I see that happen from time to time. So you have to know what to expect as you head into, a branding project. And when you're going to start one, you gotta understand this as you head into it, because it is no small undertaking. What you don't want to do is find yourself right back in this position 1, 2, 3 years later because you didn't get it right that time.
Right. And make sure you've counted the cost, because it's going to take you, 4 to 7 months or whatever minimum. And also, are you willing to throw out all those giving envelopes and all those other, to really implement your brand, and to really, would you roll it out? You don't want to roll it out and then people still see the only thing you've done is put it on the screen, but everything else is still the same. And the hardest part, you said this, is getting it assimilated in print, because there's just so many things in print you don't realize that you had everywhere. And then the most expensive one will be your outdoor signage. Some of that's very expensive. You're talking about redoing an entire sign, like your street sign or whatever. And so you got to think about those things. But you really should, though. If it's been 15 years, and I mean that sounds like a long time, but you can get there really easily if you just kind of got busy. You probably need to refresh. Like you said, keeping those same elements the same. You don't want people to have to completely relearn who you are all over again, unless you're just trying to change your name and get away from a bad reputation or something. But anyways, So anyways, not down that road that I took us down 20 minutes later, but yeah. No,
honestly, I think, again, because this kind of section here, if you will, was all about helping you start a project. And a logo is important. Your brand is important. And again, this is all stuff, if you're going to start it, you need to be prepared for this journey, if you will. And so that kind of brings us, though, to kind of piggybacking off of branding, because it's definitely similar, is your website. And so if you say, hey, I think it's same thing. If you can go and visit, the if you will, popular church websites that you know of out there, or maybe not. I'm not talking about necessarily nationally known mega churches, but even just hey, churches in our community that are well known or whatever. Look at the websites they have. Pull up your website beside it and kind of give a comparison. And if your website just doesn't seem to match, then it's probably time for you to redesign and for you to get it updated. Now, website projects are they're a big undertaking. So again, not going to dive into all the specifics, but if you're going to start it, where do you start? Well, you just start with a homepage. It can be the same temptation, and I'll be honest, as someone who's been on the creating and building end, the temptation is to ask or to ask for or to send too much information at the beginning. I'll never forget this, and honestly, if this person out there happens to be listening or watching, please give me another chance. But I'll never forget a few years ago, I had somebody reach out to me and say, hey, we want a new website. And I said, well, here's all the different things I'm going to need to get your website up and going. And I mean, it was a big list. I was, I need this information and this information and this information. And to be honest with you, now that I'm looking back at it, I didn't need any of that. I didn't need any of the, I should say, I didn't need 90% of it. And so what I did need, though, was just the basics to get started on a homepage. So that's where you need to start. Start at a homepage. I know you have the About page and the Beliefs page and the Staff page. And I'm not saying that stuff isn't important, but to start, it's kind of like going back to the same way with the title graphic or the screen graphic. If you have to start somewhere, and the homepage is going to establish the overall look of the website. So that's where you want to start with your website. Like I said, is with just the homepage. And I will say this too, and again, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole because I could, but a lot of times a website with a solid homepage, that's going to get that is often better. And in fact, I would argue it's almost every time better than a full website that's outdated or loads slow or whatever the problem may be.
Yeah, most websites are trying to over communicate.
Yes.
Particularly church websites, because you feel like you have so much to say, but there's only a couple of things. I know this is too far than you want to go right now, but there's only a couple of things that are vitally important that you have on your website. And there's a lot of things that people can come and say, "Oh, that's great. I didn't realize that you also had this or this other program or whatever else." But we're trying to. I think we're definitely trying to say too much. And there's basically three things that people are always looking for. Is like time and location. They want to hear a sample of the pastor, right? So having some type of series up there or sermon up there is good. And then typically people want to know, what do you have for their kids? So there's a lot of things that's important to us. Like I know that, I'm really convinced that you want to scroll 30 pages on my doctrinal statement. But that might not be the most important thing always to someone who's just looking in the area. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the more that I study, if you will, and create church websites, I am convinced that the church website, the primary purpose of the church website is to seek to make personal connections with your online audience. You want to actually get some type of connection, whether that's they filled out some type of online communication card, or they reached out to you through send us a message thing online, whatever it may be. That I've seen these plan your visit tools and whatever, something like that. Because what that does is it gives you the ability to start contacting and connecting and reaching out to this person before they ever set foot in your church. And so there's a lot of things your website should do and a lot of things that should be included. However, I think the single greatest goal and the primary call to action, if you will, of your website is make a personal connection. If you can get them to take that step, well, now because that's what we're doing in person. I mean, how many churches? I mean, I can't think of a church that doesn't, to some extent, or in some way, I should say, stand up every week and say, hey, if you're a first-time guest with us or if you're new here, fill out this card, bring it by, we've got a gift for you. That's what you want, because we all know, whether you're a church or you're a business, that the follow-up game is all about contact information and making a connection with that person. And so anyways, if you can begin that journey, if you will, before they ever walk into the doors of the church, then that's great, because and that's what your website can do and should be doing. There's a lot of websites out there, and what they're trying to do is, like you said, over-communicate information, or they're trying to, pet peeve of mine, and definitely not something I haven't addressed before, but, man, I hate seeing online giving as a main call to action on a website. Like, your site, I know you need the funds. I get it. Like, you got to have that giving. But the truth is that, if people are new to your church and it's the first time they visit the website and they're just seeing like right away, like give online, they're like, okay, well, I mean, this church just clearly wants my money. And there are cynical people out there that are going to think that.
It doesn't work. Your church members are not going to your main church website to do their tithe or whatever. They're typically doing it from their phone or they set it up through pushback, whatever you have. But yeah, so it's I don't know if you think that, I don't know if there's like a random, maybe people think there's like a random prince out there who's trying to send them money or whatever to their church through their website. But I would say I would love to see the data on anyone that thinks that that's a really effective thing. Also, man, I would love to, you brought up something about the plan your visit thing, and this is sincere. I've never done that on our church website. I would love to know, for churches that do it, if they found it to be effective, because I have seen that. I've often wondered, like, man, should I be incorporating that on our for our church as well, because I think it's a pretty interesting thing. And I know it; they're all just gotchas to get someone's contact information. But yeah, I've never tried that.
So my couple, and really this is all very anecdotal. I don't have the data for it, but I have talked to a handful of pastors, church leaders that are using that, and the general consensus that I've heard is that the concept is awesome. However, most platforms or companies or whatever that are offering this plan your visit tool, they're overcomplicating it, because a lot of these plan your visit tools, and I'll be honest, like I've built one or two before, because somebody's hired us, a church has hired us to build their website, and they asked for it, so we do it. But a lot of them are asking for too much information. Okay. So it's saying like, hey, for example, here's your, can you tell us what service you're coming to? How many people are coming? How many kids are coming? And it just becomes a lot of like questions, and it turns people off. So here's my thing, kind of where I'm at. I think the concept, again, and from what discussions with people that I've had, I think the concept is great and that it has potential to work. But here's what I would say. Again, going back to this, I don't know of a church out there that doesn't offer some type of like gift or welcome packet to first-time guests, when they're physically there. So for me, the simplest way to do it, to implement it, is to say, okay, if you, on your website, plan your visit, when they click there, just have some quick verbiage that says something to the extent of, hey, we've got a gift for you, enter your details so that we can reserve it, and we'll see you at our next service. And it's just like a name and email form. And that's it. And again, because now you got their contact information, and if you want to, you can reach out to them and you can begin a conversation on, over email that says like, hey, we've got your gift set aside. What service do you think you're coming to? Are you coming this Sunday? Whatever. And you can start that conversation. But that's just a general kind of mistake that, again, like I always come back to not pick on churches alone, that really people that are looking for leads, because let's use the business speak for a minute. You're looking for a lead. That's what we're talking about here. And if you want to get insulted and be like, no, they're souls. Okay, you're looking for a lead that is a soul. I mean, but that's what you're doing. Like this is an opportunity, a potential person that could come to your church and could experience life change through Christ at your church. And so that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a lead. And the biggest problem when it comes to getting leads out there is that you're just trying to get too much information from that lead. And so I've heard it said, and I agree with it, that the less information you ask for, the better. You ask for an email at a minimum, and you ask for a name, email, and phone number at a maximum. And a lot of times we fall somewhere in between with just name and email. And so that plan your visit concept, again, is beautiful. But I think doing it in that application is going to be much more beneficial. Same
rules apply for an in-service connection card. And we can't go there, but everything you just said is so true. If it's too much information, I always want to take those surveys at restaurants, say, how do we do? But like when I'm on to question 14, I'm like, okay, forget it. Just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I've ever taken some type of drastic survey is when they have a really good incentive. If they say, hey, we're going to give, hey, these $100 Amazon gift card, I hear these on other podcasts, like, hey, fill it out, be entered to win a gift card to Amazon or whatever. And occasionally I'm like, you know what, might be the risk might be worth the reward. I've never won one, but hey, there it is. I did actually have one time where I had somebody, and they straight up told me, I mean, it was a big survey, but they straight up said, you take this survey, we guarantee you're not entered for a drawing, we just simply guarantee you a $100 gift card. So I was like, all right, cool, I'll do it. It took me 15 minutes. So I was like, hey, that was worth the $100. And so, but anyways, all that to get back to, yes, on the website, think about, as you're getting started with your website, you're making your homepage, think about what the purpose of your website is and what the purpose of your homepage should be. It's not to overwhelm people with insane amounts of information about your church. It's not to talk about how wonderful your church is and what you believe in your history and all that stuff. No, it's really to connect with a person and motivate them and inspire, or really it's more of inspiring them to connect with you. And so when you're starting your website, again, set your expectations, and as far as asking your your web developer or whatever, all you really need to ask for at the beginning is, hey, let's just get the homepage. And when the web developer says, yeah, all we're going to do is the homepage, cool. You understand why? Once the homepage is established, we'll build it out from there. Now the next...
Unless you're willing to give every visitor $100 for filling out a connection card, just across the board. Yeah, unless you're there. So
Well, I mean, I do see churches that like, hey, we'll give you a $5 gift card if you fill this out. I mean,
and it works. People do it.
Yeah, people do it, and so I think your church has done this before. I really loved the thing. I don't know if it works in perpetuity or if it's just something that is good for certain seasons. But I think you've done it like, hey, if you fill out one of these connection cards or whatever, I think you were telling me you did this in person, then we're going to make a donation to whatever this charity is or something like that. I think that's really cool because then people are feeling like, hey, I'm behind something here. Like
the biggest. It was crazy. The biggest. We give away Chick-fil-A cards here, and now they can't use them on Sunday, But so that's what we do for, hey, fill out a card, we'll give you a Chick-fil-A. And it works marginally well. But yeah, the time that we said for everyone who fills out a card, we're going to give $5 to this. It was a battered women's shelter. Everyone there every visitor filled out a card. It was crazy. It was 100%. Yeah. So which is good. It restores your faith in humanity that someone's desire to help somebody else is greater than their desire to get a free, sandwich or whatever. So it's true. And we do that. We'll continue to do that pattern on Easter or a Christmas service. It allows us to partner with a local charity, and it also helps people to, like you said, get behind it. So all of those are good ideas. It's just it's not something you can do every single week, but it's a great idea. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So now we talked about the website. Like, hey, here's where I'm going to start my website project. Well, what about a video? Where are we going to start for a video? And really, at the core of starting any type of video is a script or at least some type of an outline of saying, like, here, it is going to depend on the style, if you will, of the video. But you at least have to say, here's kind of the timeline I want to see in the video. We're going to start here and end here. And really this goes for, it doesn't matter any type of video that is actually seeking to drive some type of narrative and communicate something meaningful. It needs to have this sort of script or outline. I mean, I've even gotten on, here before and need to make some type of quick promo video or something. And, I may not have something scripted or outlined, but I've at least come up with some type of outline in my head, whatever. And whatever. I'm not just like pressing record and just like making it up as I go. And so that principle applies to any type of video. That's where you're going to want to start. The temptation could be to start with like saying, oh, I want a video that is really cool and epic and whatever, and that's great, but we really need to start with like what's the purpose of this video, what's it going to communicate, what's the content, and that's determined when you come up with an outline or a script.
Right, because what happens if you don't have an outline or script? Your video is going to be like twice as long as you had originally planned for it to be. Because once you start talking about something you're passionate about, it can just go on and on and on and on. So this is especially true. We find this with announcement videos all the time. People just don't know when to stop talking. And so you want that script really helps you get the vital information across without losing the attention span of your listeners. Yeah, that's true. That's true of any production that you're going to do. So true.
Exactly. Of course, I have to pause for a moment here and talk about the first ever video you and I made together. You remember it, right? I mean, it was me, you, and two other guys. Three other guys. One of them was the cameraman, and we completely made that video up. No script, nothing written down. We just made it up as we go. Now, in the moment, it was hilarious, and it was
great.
It's an amazing memory, and I remember
won an Oscar.
Yeah. And I remember it was well received even to the audience that we showed it at like a youth rally. However, you look back at it now and you're like, this is awful. this is just poorly made. This is, makes no sense really when you think about it. And so all that to say, if you want an effective video, one that's actually going to inspire people and actually get them to take action, you have to have some type of a script or outline, and that's where everything starts. I would say even a step further, a advanced video project. Because again, we could talk about different types of, like you talk about an announcement video. Well, some of that can be a little bit of that can be a little more cut and dry. But if you want an advanced video project, like, hey, I want a special promo video for my church or for an upcoming event or whatever, that almost always needs to start with some type of conversation with your video creative. That's the only one I say that it's very hard it's very hard to start that type of a project over email. Like you've got to have some type of like meeting like this or phone call or something. But don't
that is one really great video to have is that hey, welcome, to our church intro that you'd have on a website or something like that, because I guarantee you a lot of your traffic that's going there would be willing to watch that video, assuming that you kept it under like a 5 or 6 minute mark or something like that. But you can communicate a ton of stuff in a 5 minute video, especially for someone who's new. So yeah.
So again, any video though, do not approach a videographer or producer or whatever if you don't have some type of written script and or outline. Even if you want to hire, and I would say that if the video guy is good, then you really should also be hiring him for his creative skill as far as developing the actual, maybe even script of the video. But you at least need to have an outline, something that says, here's what I want, whatever. So that's as far as knowing like where to actually start these actual projects. And of course the next thing, and I'll try not to spend too much time here, but because I feel like we have to constantly harp on it, is this, you have to make sure you have the budget. If you're going to go in and you're not willing to make the appropriate investment, it's just going to make for a really, it's going to disappoint everybody, really. You're going to be disappointed because you're either going to get a end product that's not great, or you're not going to find somebody who's able to take on the job. And so just to give you an idea, when you're talking about custom design, and all of this varies, but we're talking about custom design and you want an actual graphic designer to work on this, whether it's a logo or like I said, an event graphic. I mean, you got to be thinking $50 to $100 an hour, kind of in the range there. And a lot of times there's, and almost every time there's some type of minimum. So, hey, you're going to have to at least, there's a 3-hour minimum on this project, or whatever. And then an additional, and then hourly billing is the conventional way of doing it. Many designers are still doing it that way in one way or another. Of course, if you know anything, that's not how we do it here. We don't do hourly billing here, but a lot of creatives still are doing that. So for design, you're looking at that. Web development. Now, there's a lot of times there's an hourly cost on that, but I would just say you gotta, at least a minimum of like $1,000, and honestly, probably much more than that. $1,000 is going to be for like somebody who's going to set up a really very simple website for you, or whatever, and that's usually for the setup of the website. And then there's also typically some type of ongoing maintenance, support, hosting type of cost as well. That's an annual or monthly recurring fee. And then for video, again, if you're talking about a custom video, there can be some exception, but $1,500 plus. Especially if you're going to expect somebody to come on location. At $1,500 plus, and to be honest with you, again, if you want somebody really good, that's really going to make something super sharp, $2,000, $3,000. It can add up really fast. And I'll tell you this, Jeremy, and we, you and I have had this discussion many times. For the naysayer, if you will, out there, that still seems like it's a lot, and that's what I appreciate about, from what I've gathered, our audience here on Church Media HQ, by and large, they are very much like very much like of the understanding of like they value the media, they value that creative aspect, and so I don't think we have a ton of cheapskates that tune in. But for the cheapskate, if you will, or the naysayer out there that's maybe stumbled across this episode, and that's like, why is it so expensive? I mean, here's the thing: until you have done it, you don't realize how much time it takes and the resource and the energy that it really does consume. And so, because I suppose the kind of a traditional approach in the past has always been, well, I've got so-and-so on salary over here, and they've got, a Mac. And, I even noticed that, they've got an iPhone, so it's got a nice camera. Go make a video. And you're paying that person the same regardless because they're on salary or whatever. But I guarantee you, if you went and sat down with that person and said, how long did this take you? I mean, you would be shocked at the amount of time it took. So all that to say, circling back to this, when it comes to the budget and the amount of investment, you have to set your expectations properly. And to be honest, if you're like, all of that sounds like way too expensive, then it's just not quite time for you to move forward. Now, I'm not saying don't move forward. I'm saying you have some big mental obstacles to overcome before you can really take this on.
Right. And I would say, too, that of the services we talked about, video is going to be the most expensive. But just to encourage people that I think that at some point, and we hit this point a lot later in our ministry than we probably should have, but at some point you're going to hit a tipping point of saying, okay, when should I start to hire out some of my creatives, whether that's designing my tracks, printed material, whether it's designing my graphics or whatever else. And for us, finally, I think there's two things you have to think about when considering whether or not you've hit your tipping point. I realize there's some pastors out there that you're doing everything. You're visiting, you're preaching, and you're also designing all the stuff. And you're pretty good, and you self-taught, and you have a nice computer or whatever else. I think you have to consider, would you feel that your time is more valuable to be used in another area? If it's going to, just bluntly, if it's going to take you 3 hours to design graphics for an upcoming event, could you have used that 3 hours to get a couple more people to come to that event, or people that could be long-term church members or whatever? Probably so, especially if you're someone who really likes to get out there. And then secondly, when you feel like your skill is no longer sufficient. And for me, I reached both those areas, and I just told our pastor we need to hire out a decent portion of all of the stuff that we're creating. And a church, once you start seeing what really good graphics could look like, it really makes a big difference in keeping people interested in coming back and desiring those kind of things. So I think that if you're going to do something like that, a great approach and is to reach out to Luke, because they've got plans and packages and all that other stuff. And now that I've done that, the only struggle I really have to worry about keeping myself after is just reminding myself to work out far enough on the calendar in the future to be giving stuff to you guys in order for us to get it back, and just training myself to always be looking 2 months out minimum of what's coming up next and giving you that information and detailed. But it's so great to just hand it off and say, and this is what I've been able to do for the last 2 years now, and I'm hooked, is just to be able to hand it off to you and say, all right, here's what I'm looking for, guys. We'll talk in a week or whatever, and when it comes back, just being able to approve it and send it off to print or have it for our screens here or whatever is just such a game changer. Because before it was like, we really need this graphic to show on Sunday, so I'm making it on Saturday night, and it's definitely not a headache that I want to take on. So that's my biggest worry now, is just working out far enough and keep sending you guys requests and stuff. But man, it's so much easier than what we were doing before, and it's been a triple times the investment, just of the value, I guess what I'm trying to say, of the investment. So I think if you're kind of struggling on that tipping point, look, just try it a year. Put it into your budget for a year to use a creative service like ChurchMediaHQ, or someone similar. You've said this 100 times. Look, if we're not the company for you, just find a company that can allow you to do what you do best, and then to do what they can do best. And so that, I think it's hugely valuable, and I'm not going to turn back, because it definitely has allowed me to do things that are more important for what my job title actually is. And so I really value, using a service like you guys now. And that's not just a plug, that's just the truth. So, if you're stressing out a lot about these things, and you realize you're not the best person that could be doing this and you could be doing other things, probably time for you to try it for a year and just see and work with somebody. Try to be a little less picky and a little look at the big picture of saying, man, all this time you're getting back. And yeah, maybe if you're doing it, you would have done it just a little bit more different. But it's not worth the stress of you having to take that onto your plate, as well as creating all of the content for your sermons or teaching, as well as trying to visit up and counsel people and all this other stuff. You got a lot in your plate, and this is probably one of those items you should move off your plate in order for you and your ministry to go to the next level. So that's just my personal opinion. I know people struggle with the price tag on it sometimes, but I think you'd be amazed at how affordable Luke can be, Church Media HQ and other places can be. If you're, let's say if you're not touching video, if you're just touching all of the other things, and you might need to make a video, you might need to redo your website, you might need to do all those things, but just reach out and have a conversation, because for a long time I told myself it was something we couldn't do, and it was an untruth, and so I'm really glad that we started doing it. So yeah.
Well, I do always appreciate your kind words, Jeremy, there. And, of course, we do love working with your church. And it's very nice to know that you're not going back. And it gives us some job security, at least when it comes to your account.
There you go.
And that actually does give me a great opportunity to take a moment to talk a little bit more about Church Media HQ, and we've started to talk about our Church Media HQ free trial more often here over the past several episodes, and that's because we've completely revamped our pricing now, or our pricing and our process, I should say. Now, we've been talking about some really expensive rates when it comes to creatives. So when it comes to paying for, like we said, design, and most creatives are using hourly billing and things like that. Well, with Church Media HQ, all of our plans are flat rate monthly or annual billing, and so there's never any surprises or anything like that. And so if you are just getting started, you'll know exactly how much to budget. We have plans ranging from, and the starting price for everything is $99. It's just $99 a month, and we have plans, three different levels actually, again, starting at $99 a month. And the really nice thing is that if you're still skeptical and you don't know if it's for you, I always say, I don't want you to take our word for it. I don't want you to just blindly buy into what I'm saying and believe that we're good. No, we want to give you the opportunity to actually try it at no cost, but also no risk to you. So when you go to ChurchMediaHQ.com, you're going to see that you can actually start a free 30-day trial of Church Media HQ. And here is kind of the best part. There's no credit card required. So it's not like we're banking on you forgetting and then automatically, paying us 30 days later. No, there's no credit card, because this is not about us trying to get some type of forgotten payment out of you. This is about us really working with your church to make sure it's a good fit and to make sure that we can work for you. Now, what does this trial include? Well, there's a lot of benefits at Church Media HQ, but the three most dominant and I guess kind of flagship features are you can send us an on-demand design request, and we will actually deliver a design for you. We can actually set up a new website for your church, and we can get on a coaching call to discuss strategy and more with your church about the weeks and months ahead. And again, all of that is included. You can take advantage of all three of those flagship features and more during your 30-day trial. So again, to get started, head over to ChurchMediaHQ.com. That's ChurchMediaHQ.com. Click Start for free and start your 30-day free trial of Church Media HQ. So again, Jeremy, thank you for the opportunity to give that plug, that promo. And again, it's nothing new to our listeners out there. They know this is something we offer. But I do also want to echo one more thing that you said, that honestly, in the world of, if we are in the world of sales here, it's probably a bad idea, but I'm going to say it. And that is, if you try us out and you don't like us for whatever reason, you don't like our pricing, you don't like our style, you don't like our process, we get it. We understand we're not for everyone. And so we are going to recommend you to somebody else. We're gonna put you in direct contact with another designer or videographer or whatever it may be, if that's the case. And we're going to actually make sure that you get connected with somebody. Even though we couldn't help you, we're going to make sure you get connected with somebody else who can. And that is a guarantee that that we make. So you've really got nothing to lose. There's no cost, no risk. It's all a trial. It's all done through this free trial. Free, again, free for 30 days. And if at the end of the 30 days we haven't found our good fit, we will help you. We will connect you with someone who could potentially work for you. Now, Jeremy, as we continue to talk about just again doing these creative projects and what we I should say what kind of the different phases and stages, if you will, kind of, and different aspects, factors, and components to think about. The next thing is to allow a right amount of time, and we've kind of alluded to this earlier. You know, we did spend kind of an extended time talking about just the time it takes to implement a brand already, but I'm talking about on maybe these more simple projects. So when it comes to a design, and you ask for a custom design, you're going to want to give most designers 2 to 4 weeks, depending on obviously the complexity of the project. And there could be some creatives or designers out there listening saying, well, it doesn't take me that long and whatever. And yeah, a lot of designers can work faster than that, but it's not necessarily about giving them ample time. It's about giving you and your church ample time to make sure you are good to go on, again, this event, this sermon series, whatever it may be. So you need 2 to 4 weeks is what you need to allot. You say, hey, I want this design, I want it done, and I want to be presenting it or projecting it on our screens or whatever it may be at this certain date. Well, back it up 2 to 4 weeks. If there's print, you might want to add an additional 2 or so weeks, sometimes more, to give it time to print and ship and deliver to you. And Jeremy, you're kind of doing this day in and day out, and so if there's any insight you can give on the turnaround of like a design or maybe a print project, feel free to share it.
Yeah, if we're printing anything, I try to have it submitted to the printer 6 to 8 weeks out. The reason is and more towards the 8 weeks. And when you think about that, man, okay, what's coming up at your church 2 months from now? That's really thinking pretty far out for most churches, but you got to get used to it, because if I send this off to the printer, let's say I'm at 8 weeks. If I send this off to the printer, I can't expect to get that back, physically in my hands any less than 10 days. It's going to take them in production 3-4 days at least, and then however long it takes, to mail or whatever. And man, you can get in a trap where you're paying for rush shipping. That's really expensive. Rush production, yep. That's not as expensive, but still expensive. And for me, I love to have 4 or 5 weeks of letting the community know about something, in particular if it's a big event. Now, if you're just announcing a sermon series or whatever, I like to have, and so this is just a graphic on a screen, I like to have 2 or 3 weeks to get people excited about it. I think any longer than 3 weeks, people aren't going to stay in tune for that long. But you want a little bit of lead time to create some excitement. It's amazing. It always amazes me. It probably amazes people in church world how many times I feel like I've said an announcement 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and people still haven't really heard it. It's amazing. I guess it goes to show, like when I'm up there making an announcement, people probably just tune me out. Or they're looking at a bulletin or their phone or whatever. So it's amazing how many times you have to communicate something, put it everywhere, blast it everywhere, for people to realize, oh, that's this week. It starts this week. So you can't get frustrated with people. You just got to do a better job. And so I would say printing anything, lead time, really, man, 7-8 weeks, because you need it to come back to you, and then you need to get people excited about it, and then you need to get it out into the community, and all that just takes a while. So for the most part, I think most churches, from what I've talked to, are just not working far enough out in their calendar planning and promoting, and it's really, really going to come to bite you when you start working with somebody else, because now if you're behind, you can't just stay up super late that night designing it. Something doesn't look that great anyways. So you really got to force yourself to be working 3 and 4 months out in your calendar, and that's tough, but you just got to do it. And so set it on, weekly on your schedule, just to look ahead in your calendar. Every other week in your schedule to be looking ahead in my calendar. That took me probably about a year to learn well, because I'm just not a great disciplined person on those type of things. But if you don't, it just kills you. So
yeah. Well, and I can echo what you said there. The more time you give for printing in particular, the better. I mean, 6 to 7 weeks, that sounds like a long time. That sounds like, oh man, that's but it's really not. And a lot of it, yeah, it does. What is going to play into it is, like you were saying, how long do you want to promote this? You know, if you want to be able to promote it for a good month, then yeah, I mean that makes because I think one of the biggest kind of traps that we can fall into is we look at the calendar and we go, oh well, you know, Christmas is in December, it's October. Oh well, Christmas is still a long way away. Well, Christmas and as far as the day, the season, you know, whatever is maybe still 2 months out, but when do you really need to start promoting? When do you really need to start pushing it? Well, probably no later than like the weekend after Thanksgiving. You know, that's when everybody gets kind of in the Christmas mindset. So you've got to. So when you think of it that way, you're like, oh yeah, that actually is a reasonable turnaround to make sure we get everything in time.
Right, and it's I've heard this so many times. People get up there and be like, oh, hey, Christmas in a couple weeks, and we want to know, but we're really excited about it. Really soon, coming in about a week or two, we're going to have these flyers coming in to promote it. You don't want to be that person. As soon as you start talking about it, you want to say, okay, we've got this for it, and here's the graphic for it, right? And here's the card to pass out. Have all of that, and not be like, oh, it's coming. That just communicates like, oh, it caught us off guard too. And I realize that someone in your church is not thinking about your Christmas cantata, you know, before Thanksgiving. But you dead sure better be, or you're in trouble. And
well, Jeremy, I have to
be ready to roll it out.
Yeah, and I have to ban you from the show now because you said the word cantata.
Did I? I know I did. So that was old. Well, you know what? It was that episode. The guy that you had on from Canada when we did our music episode, he used the word cantata like 17 times. It's just stuck in my brain, and so.
But he is of the generation where that is acceptable. I mean, and
he's Canadian, so I can't be borrowing words.
Don't be surprised if like you just heard like some type of a bleep or whatever, because Bo, our producer and editor, hates the word cantata. It's like one of his. So don't be surprised if you just heard, yeah, if you're gonna have a Christmas beep, that's why. Like Jeremy, he just said cantata.
He just randomly was, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I feel like I had a long run. I made it 18 months on this podcast before getting canceled. So I feel like that's a decent, and today's standards, that's quite a run that I had. So
yeah, so this is Jeremy's retirement, everybody. Thanks for having us, or thanks for joining us. But hey, you're out. But
well, in that case, there's a lot of things I've been wanting to say. So here we go. No.
Let me tell you a thing or two. So all that getting back to you want to be ahead when it comes to the print. You want to give your designer, though, that's the point, is if you're gonna need something designed and you're gonna need print, then you need to start that conversation with your designer several. Yes. I mean like you said, 6, 7, 8 more weeks out, and then also like with let's talk about a website. If you want a custom website built, you're really looking at about 4 to 8 weeks in most cases. I mean, most times if it's a truly custom website, I'm not talking about going to Squarespace or Wix or something like that. Yeah, sure, you can set those up with templates really fast. But if you really want something custom, built on a WordPress or some type of platform like that, yeah, it's going to take about that 4 to 8 weeks to develop. And then a video, it's just so hard to really determine. So that's why I say 4 or more weeks, because if it's a short project and a very specific style of project, then okay, 4 weeks is reasonable. But if it's like a long, like extended, more creative project with a lot of different, with a more production heavy style, then you're gonna. It can take the most recent church video promo that we did took us 2 months. That was your shooting and then editing and everything, and that's not unheard of. It's pretty standard, actually. I know a lot of videographers that's going to be about how long it takes. So, so you just want to give, you want to allot the right amount of time. Don't be this guy who expects things to be quick. And I love this statement. It's harsh, but it's true. how does it go? I'm probably going to butcher it, but like a lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. And you know, I remember the first time I got told that because for whatever reason I was running behind and I had to pull somebody in, and so anyways, this is just all stuff to keep in mind as you are beginning to dive into a creative project. And yeah, there's a whole lot more to the process. There is. I mean, I know there's a lot more steps, if you will. And we could talk. We'll probably we will at some point dive into all of that later. But this is just talking about, hey, you're going to start. Where are you going to start? What do you need to have your expectations, if you will, at the beginning? How much do you need to budget? What time of time do you need to allot? And so I hope this has been helpful. And a lot of this, it's just the same as anything. I mean, the more you do it, the more familiar you'll go, the more you can develop a process. And again, I can't emphasize enough, if you just want, that's another reason why we encourage people to hop on our free trial, because it just gives you an opportunity it's not going to cost you anything. You'll have to take a little bit of time, to make it happen, but it gives you the opportunity to learn the process of working with, a creative or a creative team. Even if it doesn't work out long term, at least give you the opportunity to kind of see how it works. And so, I mean, that really wraps us up. I mean, Jeremy, any kind of closing thoughts as we kind of wrap up this conversation and this little series of content?
I would just say, if you probably need to be working with somebody. There are ways to step in without jumping in and turning over everything. But it's probably good for you to, you can start with something like, okay, I'll turn over the designing of all of my events, right, to somebody else in this year. Reach out and contact Luke. Or what we did this year was we are doing a couple of things in-house, a couple of video projects or whatever else. And it's basically budget-based. We feel like we don't have the budget to professionally do videos yet. Okay, well, it's where we're at. But what we knew we could start to step is now all of our events, someone else designs the graphics, you guys do. And then now all of our sermon series as well, particularly, the 6, 7, 8, really impactful, what we feel will be very impactful sermon series. I'd let you guys design. And man, that's been a game changer. I wouldn't have thought that would be something that we utilize so much. But to have it be something that looks really good and that we can promote really well coming into it has really made a big impact, and people have talked about it and invited people and really liked the series and enjoyed the series, partially just because we were thinking ahead on it. We're just doing a better job planning. And the biggest thing I'd say, the biggest benefit is, yes, things look better with the designer and all this other stuff, but the benefit of us now planning farther in the future because we hired someone out, forcing us to think ahead in the future, has been the biggest improvement in the last 2 years for us, is just planning farther out. And I should have been doing it before. I should have been better disciplined, but I just wasn't. Now I'm being forced to be more disciplined, and it's definitely been a lot better for our ministry. And that's what we want. We want to do right by our people. We want to do right by our Savior. And it's been a blessing. So you probably should be working with somebody. And I would just say, look, just have a conversation. Call Luke. Just start digging around into that. You might think that you can't, and you might be surprised at how affordable or how possible it is, for you to take some steps to getting some of this design off your plate into somebody else's hands and allowing you to get some of your valuable time back. So that's all.
Yeah, exactly. So again, we hope that you'll give us a try, start your trial, and then, because like I said, if nothing else, it's going to help you learn the process. And hopefully at the end of that time even, whether you continue to work with us or not, we're able to help you at least in some way of, like I said, understanding how it works and moving forward from there. So, well, Jeremy, it's always good having you with us, and thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
All right, thanks, man.